Nobody drives out to Coldwater Hollow by accident. You have to want it. 31 miles of county road that gives up on asphalt somewhere past the grain elevator and turns to washboard gravel that'll loosen your fillings. I've made that drive maybe 200 times. The first time, I was there to tell a woman her land wasn't worth the loan she was asking for. The last time, I was there because a company with more money than the state of Oklahoma wanted to hand her $30 million for a crop everybody around here called garbage corn. I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a bad habit of mine. I keep a little spiral notebook in my truck's console, and I still get ahead of myself. My name doesn't matter much to this story, but you should know I was the one who said no to her first. Loan officer, the man behind the desk. I've spent 30 years telling people in this county what their dreams are worth on paper, and I have been wrong exactly once in a way that mattered. This is that story. The one where an old woman with dirt under her fingernails and a dead husband's ledger taught a food scientist, a room full of lawyers, and me, especially me, what the word worthless actually means. Stay with me, it goes places you won't expect. The morning it started to turn, I was watching Odell Mercer cry into a coffee cup, and I didn't understand why yet. She wasn't crying the way people cry in front of a banker. I'd seen that plenty, the wet, performing kind, the kind that's really an argument. This was different. She had her back half turned to me, standing at the kitchen window over a sink full of jars, and her shoulders were doing this small, steady tremble like a truck idling. She wasn't making noise. She'd have been mortified to make noise. Odell Mercer would sooner have walked into traffic than let a man from the bank hear her break. I pretended to read the papers in my lap. That's a thing I do. When somebody needs a second to put their face back on, I look down and rustle whatever's in my hands and let them have it. My wife used to say I had the bedside manner of an undertaker, which she meant as an insult, but I took it as the opposite. Undertakers are gentle with people on the worst day of their lives. I try to be too. You want me to come back, I said, not a question, an offer. No, she set the cup down, turned around. Her eyes were red but dry now, willed dry. No, you drove all the way out. Say what you came to say, Walter. So I said it. I'd rehearsed it in the truck, which I always do, because there's no kind way to tell a 73-year-old widow that the bank is going to take the only thing she has left, so you may as well make the words land clean. The second mortgage her late husband Roy had taken against the property was 3 payments behind. The extension she'd applied for, the one that had brought me out to the hollow with a folder and a churning gut, had been denied. Not by me. I want that on the record even now. By people in Tulsa who'd never smelled her kitchen, but I was the face of it. I was always the face of it. How long, she said. 90 days, then it goes to the process. I hated the word process. It's what we say when we don't want to say we take your home. She nodded slow like she was doing math, and then she surprised me. She laughed, just once short, more breath than sound. Roy always said this ground would kill me before I killed it. She looked out the window again at the field behind the house, 40 acres sloping down to the creek, half of it fallow, the other half planted in something dark I couldn't make out from where I sat. He was right about the killing part, wrong about the order. I didn't have anything for that. I'm not a quick man. My daughter's quick. She can fire a joke back before you finish the setup. But I take my time, and by the time I've got the good thing to say, the moment's usually gone. So I just closed my folder and asked if I could see the field. I don't know why I asked. It wasn't in the job. But something about the way she'd looked at that dark stretch of corn made me want to see what a woman would trade her dignity to keep. We walked out the back. October in eastern Oklahoma is the best month and the worst liar, warm gold light and a wind that promises the cold's coming whether you're ready or not. She moved slow, one hand on the fence line, and I slowed to match her without making a thing of it. The corn was black. I don't mean dark green. I mean black. The kernels, when she peeled back a husk to show me, were the deep bruised purple black of a ripe plum, almost wet-looking, each one catching the light like a little stone. I'd grown up in this county. I'd seen field corn, sweet corn, popcorn, the ornamental stuff people hang on their doors in fall. I'd never seen anything like this. What is it? I asked. Roy's, she said, like that was an answer. Then, seeing my face, his grandmother brought the seed up from somewhere south. Family kept it going 100-some years. Roy planted a patch every year we were married, 41 years. She rolled a kernel between her fingers. Everybody told him it was a waste of ground, won't sell. Too hard to mill, the color scares the co-op buyers. Yields are trash compared to the dent corn. She let the kernel drop back into her palm. He planted it anyway, stubborn old fool. Why'd he keep it? She thought about that longer than I expected. Because his grandmother did, she finally said, and because it tasted like something. He used to say the yellow stuff tastes like paper and this tastes like dirt and rain and Sunday. She smiled at the memory and it took 10 years off her. I make a cornbread with it, blue-black dents, he'd eat half a pan. I stood there in a dead man's field holding a foreclosure folder, looking at corn the color of a storm, and I felt the first thread of something I couldn't name yet. Not hope. I'm too old for the ambush of hope. Just a snag. A place where the smooth story of this land is worthless. This woman is finished caught on something and wouldn't pull free. You still grow it just for cornbread? I asked. I grow it, she said, because if I stop, it stops. 100 years of somebody keeping it alive and it ends with me quitting. She started back toward the house. I don't quit, Walter. I'm too dumb to quit. Ask anybody. Here's the part where I'm supposed to tell you I went back to the bank and fought for her. I didn't. Not then. I want to be honest in this account because the whole thing hinges on how ordinary I was about it at the start. I drove home. I ate dinner. I told my wife about the black corn because it was the interesting part of my day, and she said, huh, and we watched our shows and went to bed. I filed Odell Mercer's folder in the stack with the other folders, and the 90-day clock ran on without me thinking much about it, because that's what clocks do, and that's what I did. 3 weeks passed. What changed it, and I've turned this over 100 times, the sheer dumb luck of it, was my daughter. Renee, she's the quick one. She'd come home for a weekend, and she does this thing where she cooks and interrogates you at the same time, and she asked what was new, and I, having nothing new, told her about the widow with the black corn. She stopped stirring. Purple-black, wet-looking kernels, grinds blue. I guess why. She pulled out her phone. She's 31 and she solves problems the way her generation does, with a screen and a search bar, and I used to find that lazy and I have since learned to shut my mouth about it. She read for a minute. Her eyebrows went up. Dad, anthocyanins. Bless you. They're pigments, the stuff that makes blueberries blue and these purple corns purple. She turned the phone to me like I could read a thing without my glasses. There's this whole market. Purple corn from Peru sells for a fortune, antioxidants. Natural food dye. Companies are dying to get off the artificial red and blue stuff. There have been lawsuits, regulations. She was talking faster now, the way she does when she's onto something. If she's got an American-grown purple corn line, a stable one, 100 years of one family selecting the same seed, Dad, that's not garbage corn. That's a landrace. That's genetics nobody else has. I didn't understand half the words. I understood the look on my daughter's face. How much? I said, old habit. I always want the number. I don't know, but not zero. She set the phone down, not even close to zero. I'd like to say I acted fast. I didn't act fast. I'm not built for fast, but I acted, which for me is the notable thing. Monday morning, I did something I had never once done in 30 years at that bank. I pulled a file out of the foreclosure stack and I sat on it. Just held it. Didn't process it, didn't advance it. Told the Tulsa office I was reviewing an irregularity, which was a lie with a true heart. Then I drove back out to Coldwater Hollow. Odell was on the porch shelling something into a bowl, and when she saw my truck she went stiff, because the last time I'd come it had been to tell her she was losing everything, and people learned to brace. I'm not here about the loan, I said before I'd even shut the door. Well, I am, but not the way you think. I came up the steps with my hat in my hand like a man about to propose, which is more or less how I felt. Mrs. Mercer, I think your corn might be worth something, real something, and I think I made a mistake and I'd like to try and fix it if you'll let a fool help. She looked at me a long moment. Set down her bowl. Sit down, Walter, she said. You look like you're about to fall over. I sat, and I told her everything my daughter had told me badly, mangling half the science, and she listened with her hands folded and her face giving nothing away. And when I was done, she was quiet for so long I thought I'd offended her. I know, she said finally. You what? I know it's worth something. She looked out at the field, black and rustling in the low light. Roy knew too, toward the end. A man came out, 6 years back, some university fella, took samples, got all excited, said the same words your girl said, anthocyanins, landrace. She said the words carefully, like coins she'd been saving. He was going to come back, help us figure out how to sell it right. A pause. He died, car wreck up on the interstate. And then Roy got sick, and I got tired, and the knowing didn't do me a lick of good because knowing a thing's valuable and knowing what to do about it are two different animals. She finally looked at me. You know what to do about it, Walter. And God help me, I said yes. I did not know what to do about it. That's where I'll stop the first part, because that's where the real trouble started. Not the bank, not the money, but the slow, terrible business of two people who don't know what they're doing trying to protect something precious from a world full of people who know exactly what they're doing. I still have the notebook from those weeks. The first page just says, in my own cramped hand, find out what black corn is worth. Do not let them take it from her. I underlined the second part twice. I didn't yet know how hard I'd have to fight to keep that promise, or who I'd end up making it against. In a suit showed up on a Tuesday, and I knew we were in trouble before he'd stepped out of the car. It was a rental. That's the tell out here. Nobody in this county drives a car that clean, and nobody local rents, so a spotless gray sedan easing down the washboard road with its wipers going at the dust meant outside, and outside meant somebody had heard something. I was on Odell's porch when it came into view. I'd taken to spending Tuesdays and Thursdays out at the Hollow by then, telling the bank I was site inspecting a collateral irregularity, which was still a lie, and still had a true heart, and was getting harder to keep saying with a straight face. Company, I said. Odell looked up from the ledger. We'd been going through Roy's records, 41 years of them, planting dates and seed weights in his slanted pencil, a whole marriage measured in bushels, trying to build the thing my daughter said a company would need, provenance. Proof the seed was theirs, continuous, uninterrupted. 100 years of one family's hands. Renier had explained it to me twice on the phone, patient the way you're patient with an old man, and I'd written it in my notebook. The story is the value. The unbroken line is the value. Protect the line. The man got out, young, 40 maybe, with the kind of soft, handsome face that's never done a day's real work and doesn't have to. He looked at the field first, not at the house, not at us. At the field. His whole body did a thing when he saw the black corn, a little pause, a hunger he covered fast, and I thought he already knew. He came out here knowing. Mrs. Mercer, he came up the walk with his hand out and a smile installed. Davin Kessler, I'm with an agricultural sourcing group. We work with specialty crops. I wonder if I could take a few minutes of your time. Odell didn't take the hand. She's got manners that shame a duchess, so this was a decision, and I clocked it. You can talk to Walter, she said. He handles my business. I did not, in any legal or real sense, handle her business. I was a foreclosure officer who'd gone rogue with a spiral notebook. But she said it with such flat certainty that Kessler turned to me and reinstalled the smile, and just like that I was somebody, and I had to become somebody fast because a man like this eats slow old bankers for lunch. Walter, he wanted my last name. Just Walter's fine, I said. My daughter told me later that was the smartest thing I did all month, not giving him a name to run. I didn't do it smart. I did it because I didn't want him calling the bank. He made his pitch on the porch. He was good. I'll give him that. He was very good. And if I hadn't had 3 weeks of Renier's late-night phone tutorials in my ears, I'd have signed whatever he put down. He talked about partnership. He talked about de-risking for a woman in Odell's situation. And the way he said situation let me know he'd done his homework. He knew about the loan, he knew the 90-day clock, he knew she was drowning and he'd come to sell her a life raft with a hole in it. He offered to buy the seed stock and the growing rights outright. A flat sum, $40,000. He said the number like it was a mercy. And here's the thing that still puts a cold stone in my gut. $40,000 would have cleared the loan. It would have saved the house. To a woman 3 payments behind and staring down the process, $40,000 was not an insult. It was salvation. It was the exact size of the hole she was in, which is how I knew, bone certain, that he'd calculated it to be. He wasn't offering her the value of the corn. He was offering her the value of her desperation, and those are two different animals, and he was betting she couldn't tell them apart. I watched Odell's face while he talked. She wanted it. God, of course she wanted it. I could see the wanting move across her like whether the pure animal relief of it could be over, the fear could stop. Her hand had gone to the ledger on her knee, Roy's ledger, and her thumb was rubbing the cracked cover the way you'd rub a worry stone. And I understood that she was holding onto her dead husband to keep from grabbing this man's terrible mercy with both hands. "That's generous," she said. Her voice was steady, I don't know how. "It's the best number in the market," Kessler said, which was a lie so smooth it barely disturbed the air. "I'll need to think. Of course, though I'd hate for you to," and here his voice dropped into something gentle and awful. "I'd hate for the timing to get away from you, ma'am. These windows close, and I understand there's a bank situation with some urgency to it." That's when I stood up. I'm not a big man, and I'm not a brave one, and I have spent my life being the person who delivers other people's decisions, not making my own. But something about hearing him weaponize her fear, the bank situation, the same fear I delivered to her with my own folder 3 weeks back, put a heat in me I hadn't felt in years. "Mr. Kessler," I put out my hand to shake his, which confused him, which was the point. "Thanks for driving out. We've got your number. We'll be in touch if it fits." "I don't think you appreciate." "We appreciate it fine." I kept my hand out, kept my voice pleasant. "My daughter says I have a face that gives nothing, the banker face, 30 years of telling people no without flinching, and I gave it to him now full strength. Safe drive back. That road'll shake a rental to pieces if you take it fast." He shook my hand because there was nothing else to do with it. He left a card. He drove off slow and careful, and I watched the dust of him all the way to the county road, and then my knees went a little soft and I sat back down hard. 40,000, Odell said quietly. "Walter, 40,000 clears everything." "I know it. If you're wrong, if this corn's worth 40,000 and not a penny more, you just talked me out of my whole life." She wasn't angry. That was worse than angry. She was just laying it in front of me, the true weight of what I'd done, so I'd have to hold it too. "I've got 67 days. Can you get me a better number in 67 days? A real one. Because that man'll be back, and next time he'll bring less." I looked at the notebook in my lap. Protect the line. "I don't know," I said, because I'd promised myself I wouldn't lie to her, not once, no matter what. "But I know 40,000's the wrong number. I know it in my teeth, Odell. And I've been reading the wrong number off of paper for 30 years, so trust me, I know what one looks like." She was quiet a long while. 67 days, she said again, and went inside to start supper because the corn still needed tending and the chickens still needed feeding whether or not the world had decided her life's work was worth anything, and that, the going in to make supper, was the bravest thing I saw anybody do that whole autumn. Renier took a leave from her job. I didn't ask her to. I want that clear because I've been a father who asked too much and noticed too late, and this one she did on her own. She showed up on a Thursday with a duffel bag and a laptop, and said she'd banked enough vacation, and she wasn't going to sit in the city while her father got fleeced by agribusiness on behalf of a nice old lady. And I hugged her in the driveway harder than I'd hugged her since she was small, and neither of us mentioned it after. She was the engine. I have to say that plainly. I was the face and the hands and the man who could sit across a table and not blink, but Renier was the one who understood the actual machinery of what we were up against. She spent 4 days on the phone and the computer, and she built us a map of the thing. Here's what she found, and I'll tell it the way she told me, at the kitchen table at 11 at night, with the coffee going bitter in the pot. The purple corn market was real, and it was big, and it was getting bigger fast because of exactly what she'd said the first night, the artificial dye reckoning. The food companies were under pressure, regulatory and public, to get the synthetic reds and blues out of everything from cereal to sports drinks, and natural pigment sources were suddenly worth real money. Most purple corn on the world market came from South America. What Odell had, what Roy's grandmother had carried up from wherever, 100+ years back, and one stubborn family had kept planting through every year somebody told them to stop, was something rarer. A cold-adapted, North American-grown, genetically stable purple landrace, with a documented century of provenance sitting right there in a dead man's pencil ledger. "They can't just buy the corn," Renier said. "Anybody can buy corn. What they can't get anywhere else is this seed line, the genetics, the story. If a food company wants to say American-grown heritage purple corn on a label, and Dad, they want to, that's marketing gold, then Odell isn't a seller, she's the only supplier. There's a word for that." Monopoly, I said. Leverage, she said, and grinned, and for a second she looked exactly like her mother. But she stopped grinning fast, because she'd also found the other thing. Davin Kessler didn't work for an agricultural sourcing group. He worked, through 2 shell companies Renier unstitched over about 6 hours, for the specialty ingredients division of one of the largest food conglomerates on the continent. They weren't a small buyer testing the waters. They were the big fish, and they'd sent a man to a widow's porch with a lowball offer sized precisely to her mortgage, which meant they already knew what the corn was worth. They wouldn't have sent anyone otherwise, and they decided the cheapest way to get it was to catch her drowning. They know, I said. They already know what it's worth. They know, Renier confirmed, which means our job isn't to find out if it's valuable. Our job is to make them bid against themselves on something they thought they'd get for pocket change. She closed the laptop. And we've got 63 days, no money, no lawyer, and no idea what we're doing. 3 days ago it was 67 days, and I felt worse, I said. So we're trending up. She laughed. Odell, from the doorway in her robe, said, "What in the world are you two still doing awake?" And we told her, and the 3 of us sat at that table until 1 in the morning, and somewhere in there it stopped being my rogue crusade and became the thing all 3 of us were carrying together. I wrote it in the notebook the next day. It's not me protecting her anymore, it's us. I don't know why that felt so important to write down. It just did. The morally heavy part, the part I still turn over, came about a week later. There was a faster way. Renier found it, and to her enormous credit, she brought it to us straight even though she hated it. A seed preservation nonprofit, a good one, legitimate, would take the landrace into their protected collection for free, catalog it, keep it alive forever, put it somewhere no food conglomerate could ever fully own it. It would save the corn. The 100-year line would never die. Roy's grandmother's seed would outlive us all in a climate-controlled vault. But it wouldn't save Odell. It wouldn't clear the loan. It wouldn't save the house. Donating the seed to the vault meant losing the leverage. You can't sell a monopoly on something you've given to the commons. And it meant, almost certainly, the process, the foreclosure, the old woman moving into her niece's spare room in Muskogee with the corn safe in a vault 3 states away, and her home gone. Save the corn, or save the woman. Renier laid it out at the table and then couldn't look at either of us. And Odell, I'll never forget this, Odell said, "Well, that's easy," and both of us turned to her, and I honestly did not know which way she was going to jump. "The corn," she said, "you give it to the vault, you keep the line alive." She said it flat and fast, the way she'd say she was going to sell the corn, the same brave flatness. "The house is just a house. I'm 73, I don't need 40 acres. But that seed's older than my whole life, and it's not mine to lose. Roy's grandmother didn't carry it up here so I could gamble it to save my own comfort. You put it in the vault." She meant it, that's the thing. She wasn't posturing. She'd have done it. She'd have handed over the one bargaining chip that could save her home and walked into that spare room in Muskogee with her chin up, because to Odell Mercer the seed was 100 years of somebody keeping a promise, and she was not going to be the one who broke it for money. And that's when I understood, finally and completely, what I'd only snagged on that first day in the field. The corn wasn't valuable because it was worth $30 million. The corn was worth $30 million because it was the kind of thing a woman would give up her home to protect. The value the conglomerate was chasing, the heritage, the century, the unbroken line, existed only because people like Odell and Roy and a grandmother with no name in my notebook had refused, over and over across 100 years, to do the sensible thing and let it die. The thing that made it precious was the exact thing money couldn't have made. "No," I said. They both looked at me. "We're not putting it in the vault, not yet." I had the notebook open. I was writing while I talked, which I do when I'm scared, and I was scared. "We save both, the corn and the house. We make them pay what it's worth, and then Odell gives the vault its share and keeps her home, and Roy's grandmother's seed goes on, and nobody has to choose." I looked up. "I've spent 30 years telling people the sensible thing. I'm sick of the sensible thing. Let's do the other one." Renier stared at me. Then she pulled the laptop back open. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, Dad. Then we need to force a real bidding process, and we need to do it before Kessler comes back, and we need—" She started typing. "We need to make the biggest food company on the continent believe there's a second buyer at the table." "Is there a second buyer at the table?" Odell asked. Renier didn't stop typing. "There will be," she said. The lie worked because it wasn't quite a lie, and I've spent a year and a half deciding whether that lets me off the hook. It doesn't, but it helps me sleep. Here's what Renier actually did, because I wanted on the record that we didn't invent a fake buyer out of thin air. I wouldn't have let her, and Odell wouldn't have stood for it. What Renier did was pick up the phone and call the seed preservation nonprofit, the good one, the Vault, and tell them the whole truth. There's a century-old purple corn landrace out here, genetically stable, fully documented, and a food conglomerate is trying to strip it off a widow for the price of her mortgage. Would they be interested in acquiring it for the protected collection? Would they put that interest in writing? They would. They were thrilled. They'd been trying to get their hands on exactly this kind of thing for years, and a nonprofit acquisition offer, modest money, but real on real letterhead, landed in our inbox 4 days later. So there was a second party at the table. That part was true. What we shaded, and this is the part I've made my peace with only halfway, is the urgency and the price we let Kessler believe the Vault was offering. We didn't say a number. We just made sure when Kessler came back that he saw a competing offer on legitimate letterhead and drew his own conclusions, and a man like Davin Kessler, sent by a $9 billion company, cannot afford to assume the other bidder is small. His whole job is to not lose the thing to a competitor. We didn't lie to him about the size of the fish. We just let him keep the fear he'd brought with him and pointed it in a new direction. Renier called it judo. Odell called it giving a bully a taste. I called it in my notebook the most dishonest, honest thing I've ever done, and I underlined it once. Kessler came back on a Wednesday, and he brought a lawyer. That was the first sign we'd rattled them. You don't send a lawyer 31 miles down a washboard road for a $40,000 deal you expect to close on a porch. The lawyer was a woman, sharp, older than Kessler, and she was the one who did the looking this time. Looked at the field, looked at Renier's laptop, looked at me with the specific narrowed attention of a professional trying to figure out if the old man across from her is a fool or is pretending to be one. I've been underestimated my whole life for being slow. It has exactly once been an advantage. This was the once. We sat at Odell's kitchen table. Roy's ledger sat closed in the middle of it where I'd put it on purpose, and I watched the lawyer's eyes go to it and stay. "We'd like to revisit our offer," Kessler said. "All right," I said. He named a new number, 400,000. 10 times his first offer. 10 times in 3 weeks for corn he'd called a specialty crop he was doing us a favor to take. If I'd had any doubt left about what we were sitting on, it died right there at the table. But I'd learned something from 30 years of reading the wrong number off of paper. The first serious number is never the real one. It's the number they think you'll take. And a man who leaps from 40,000 to 400,000 in 3 weeks is a man who's afraid of losing something, and you do not comfort a frightened buyer. You let him stay frightened. "That's a real number," I said. "Thank you. We'll need to weigh it against the other party's interest and the collection value." I let collection sit there. The lawyer's pen stopped moving. Odell's got a decision to make about legacy, not just money. The seed line means something to this family. To some buyers, that's worth more than the dollars, and to some it's worth less, and she's got to figure out which kind of buyer she's talking to. It was the truest thing I said all day, and it landed like a threat, because to them it was one. I was telling them there was a bidder who valued the heritage, the Vault, and that money alone might not win, and that is the one thing a company like theirs cannot stand, because heritage is exactly the thing they were trying to buy. They needed the story on the label, and I just told them the story might go to someone who'd never sell them the label at all. The lawyer asked to speak with Kessler outside. They stood by the clean gray rental for 11 minutes. Renier timed it, and when they came back, the number was 2 million. Odell made a small sound. I put my hand flat on the table, our signal steady, and she went still. "We'll consider it," I said. I won't walk you through every turn, because it went on for 5 weeks and most of it was waiting, and waiting is the part they never show you. Waiting is the whole thing. Waiting while a $9 billion company decides how badly it wants what you have. Waiting with a foreclosure clock running underneath it all. Because that was the knife's edge. That was the thing that could have killed us at any moment. If they'd simply waited us out, let the 90 days run, let the bank take the land and bought it at auction for nothing, they'd have won. They didn't, and I know exactly why they didn't, and it's the part of this story I'm proudest of. They didn't wait us out because they no longer believed they had time. They believed there was another serious buyer, a buyer who valued the legacy, a buyer Odell might prefer, and they believed if they slow-played us they'd lose the seed line to the vault and it'd be gone from the market forever, locked in a non-profit collection off the label out of reach. Their own fear became our clock instead of theirs. Renier had turned the timing inside out. The desperation Kessler brought to that first porch meeting, he left it here. We kept it. We used it. The number went to 8 million, then 12. Then, when we brought in an actual lawyer of our own, paid on a handshake and a percentage by a man in Tulsa who heard the story and drove down the next morning. And I've since learned there are more good people in this world than my job had let me believe. The number went to 20. And then, on a gray day in December with the field cut to stubble and the first real cold finally arrived, it went to 30. $30 million for a crop everybody in the county called garbage corn. For the exclusive rights to the seed line, the growing partnership, the century of provenance in Roy's pencil, $30 million structured over years with Odell keeping a stake and a royalty, and at her absolute insistence written into the first page of the contract in language our Tulsa lawyer fought 3 days for, a clause that a portion of the original seed stock would go to the preservation vault regardless. She would not sign otherwise. She'd take their millions, but the 100-year line was going somewhere no company could ever fully own, because that was the promise, and she was not going to be the one who broke it. She saved both, the corn and the house, both. I was there when she signed. We did it at her kitchen table because she refused to drive to Tulsa, and I don't blame her. Let them come to the hollow, let them shake to pieces on the washboard road one last time. The lawyer was there, and Kessler, who by the end had stopped smiling the installed smile and had started, I think, to actually respect her, in the grudging way a hunter respects the thing that got away and came back on its own terms. Renier was there. I was there. Odell picked up the pen. Roy's ledger sat beside the contract. She'd asked for it, and nobody argued. And before she signed, she did a thing I didn't expect and will not forget. She started to cry. Not the performing kind, not the arguing kind. The same steady, quiet trembling I'd seen that first morning at the window over the jars, months before, when I'd come to tell her she was losing everything, and she'd turned her back so the man from the bank wouldn't hear her break. The same cry, but it had turned all the way over into its opposite, and that's the only time in my life I've watched grief and joy come out of a person in the exact same shape, and I had to look down at the papers in my lap and rustle them, and give her the second, the way I do. Roy, she said, just his name, to the ledger or the field or the ceiling. Roy, you stubborn old fool, they finally listened. Then she signed, Odell Mercer in a hand that shook on the line where the lawyer pointed. $30 million. People ask me how it ended, and they want the neat version. The old woman got rich and lived happily ever after. And she did get the money, most of it, the way the contract laid it out, year over year, and she cleared the loan the first week, and I drove that folder back to Tulsa myself and marked it paid, and did not explain to anyone in that office how it came to be paid. And I quit the bank that spring, which is a different story. But that's not how it ended, because it didn't end, and the not ending is the part I keep. Odell's still out there. She's 75 now. She didn't move to Muskogee, and she didn't buy a big house. She fixed the roof and the porch and put a new well in and gave a pile of it to her niece and a bigger pile to the little church. And mostly she keeps doing the exact thing she was doing the day I met her, which is getting up before light and tending a field of black corn, because the partnership means she still grows the mother seed, the real line, by hand, the way Roy did and his grandmother did. She could hire it done. She won't. 100 years of somebody keeping it alive. She told me once, and I'm not going to be the one who hands it to a machine. I go out on Tuesdays still. Not for the bank, I don't work for the bank. I go because Renier moved back and she and Odell have gotten thick as thieves, and there's usually cornbread, the blue-black dense kind, and I've come to understand what Roy meant. It doesn't taste like paper. It tastes like dirt and rain and Sunday. It tastes like something a person refused across 100 years to let die. The last page of my notebook from that autumn, I keep it in the truck console still, has the first line I ever wrote about her in my cramped hand. Find out what black corn is worth. Do not let them take it from her. I got the second part right. The first part I never really answered, and I've decided I never will because I was wrong about the whole question. I spent 30 years behind a desk telling people what their lives were worth on paper, reading them the number, watching their faces fall. and a 73-year-old widow with dirt under her nails, and a dead man's ledger taught me the one thing all those years never did. That the things worth the most are exactly the things somebody refused to sell when they were told to. She still won't tell me where the grandmother carried the seed up from. Says it doesn't matter. Says the seed's the answer and the map's not the point. I think she just likes having one thing left that's only hers.